Welcome to another edition of the Sports Club podcast. We are still at the National Stadium, and I am here with a very special guest, Laurie Whitwell. He's from The Athletic, and we're going to be talking about quite a few things football, including his experience as he got a taste of Jamaican football, even though it was disappointing for the country and not qualifying directly to the 2026 World Cup. And of course, we know the Manchester United fans out there, so we're going to be speaking a little bit about Manchester United. And we are still in the international break, so there you go. So much things to look at and so many things to talk about. Laurie, welcome to the Sports Club
Thank
podcast.
you very much, Donald.
It's a pleasure to be here with you and finally meeting you.
It was a pleasure to be here. You were very gracious with your time, explaining the intricacies of Jamaican football to me and the wider context of where this game was taking place, obviously with the backdrop of Hurricane Melissa. So thank you for having me on. It's been a pleasure to be here.
All right, Laurie, let's get straight into it because you would have experienced the National Stadium at its peak, 35,000 strong inside the National Stadium, looking on, hoping, willing the Reggae Boyz over the line. Didn't quite work out that way, but I want you to speak about the atmosphere and your experience here.
Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah, that was my big takeaway, really. I mean, I felt like I was with them, wanting Jamaica to win the game and get to qualification, because it just would have been an explosion of emotion at that moment. I think everyone was primed for it, weren't they? The stadium was absolutely packed, as you say. It kind of filled up, and yeah, it felt like every seat was taken. People were even on the far side, opposite the grandstand, sat on the tall wall behind, which did not look safe to me. But I think they even made an announcement, didn't they, at one point to say, "Please, can you get down?" But I guess that was just falling on deaf ears. That wasn't going to be heeded. I guess it was a better view that way. But yeah, a shame that the football didn't live up to everyone's expectations. But a real pleasure to be a part of a special atmosphere, because it felt just the energy from even an hour, 2 hours before kickoff was there from people. Obviously, such a huge significance of the game. First time since 1998 to potentially be going to the World Cup. Obviously, only the second time in Jamaica's history. And that was felt, that was palpable with people that you could see. People having a good time, though. The music was blasting loudly. People were dancing, ahead of kickoff. So clearly they were ready to have some enjoyment. I'm just really sad that there wasn't then that after party, after full-time whistle, where people were able to continue the good vibes, because it felt as soon as that final whistle came, it felt pretty flat, didn't it? It felt empty, and it was such a shame, because obviously the Curacao fans were happy. They came across on a couple of planes, I think. Felt like half the population was there, given how small they are as a nation.
Yes.
I would think, objective, impartial observer, it would have been brilliant if Jamaica had won that game.
I want you to paint a picture for me, because I've always wondered, you've been to many magnificent stadiums, right? So you would get to compare the energies and the loudness, the decibel levels. Can you put into context what you'd have experienced here as opposed to other stadiums? Because in Jamaica, we do admire stadiums in England and Germany. We see the Borussia Dortmund stadium and the yellow wall and the energy that comes from it. But can you compare in terms of decibel levels?
It's really interesting what different crowds do whilst they're watching a football match. So United Old Trafford fans, and generally in British football, they would sing songs about their players or about their manager, maybe in moments where they felt that they needed it. Obviously, there's tension always, and sometimes it's kind of impossible for people to sing and chant. But particularly at Old Trafford this season, they've reclaimed the Stretford end, allowed it to be for supporters that are paying general admission prices, not executive seats. They've introduced flags, so that element of it is kind of singing and chanting and really reacting to the game. It's different even in Germany. You mentioned Borussia Dortmund. I watched a Bayern Munich game at their stadium, and they will just kind of sing constantly, or sort of there's always a low hum of noise where it doesn't necessarily even reflect what's going on in the match. Like, so a goal could be scored and they're still tooting away on whatever horn they've got. And it was kind of a combination here for Jamaica, it felt like. So it was more noise and cacophony as a general kind of bass layer of atmosphere. Although at one point, I forget which player it was, but they kind of turned up from the bench because there was a bit of a lull after the first 20 minutes where it wasn't going quite to plan. I think they hoped for an early goal to really set the tone, and was kind of like waving his arms up and down to kind of say, come on, Gio. And they did react to that. But there was a very much a sense of how the game was going in people's moods and then the noise that they were transmitting. It grew into agitation at times, but you could sense that there was a real reaction to what was happening on the pitch, which I found really fascinating.
Talk to me about Steve McClaren. Obviously, he isn't. He's not quite a villain, obviously, but he's obviously not a hero.
Yep.
After all of this, but as an individual, you would have seen him as assistant coach, obviously at Manchester United, and he's been around Middlesbrough, of course, FC20 as well. But what are your thoughts on him? And were you surprised that he would have received that appointment from the JFF to be the head coach of the Reggae Boyz?
Yeah, it was such a fascinating one, wasn't it? I mean, I think so he left Manchester United to take this job, and that's the kind of headline. But there was a bit more nuance to it in that Erik ten Hag had kind of been told in discussions with the new power brokers at United, the Ineos hierarchy, that he needed to freshen up his assistants, albeit I think Steve was actually pretty well respected by the players, certainly brought a different dynamic to the coaching setup where Ten Hag and Mitchell van der Gaag, his other assistant, were quite direct. And so anyway, Ten Hag freshened up his assistants, and I think Steve was then not as integral as he perhaps had been previously, and so I think he saw this as a great opportunity. But yeah, I was surprised. I didn't see it coming when he was appointed. That being said, I think we've now established that actually before he got this job, he was doing work with FIFA that was around looking into the development of Jamaica football. Years beforehand, Arsene Wenger had sort of tasked him with this role, and so he kind of got that appreciation for what could happen here. And then obviously you've got the big golden carrot of, is that the right word? Golden carrot of of the World Cup.
It's a term.
Can we create it? Yeah. I mean, it's a rotten carrot now, isn't it? Okay, no, sorry, it's not rotten because there's still that second opportunity. It's a half-bitten carrot. Okay,
half
whatever.
chewed.
Yes, that's much better. This analogy is half chewed, to be fair. But obviously that him potentially going to the World Cup was a big draw for him in taking this job, and I think you're right. I saw your piece earlier where you were saying that this was the best opportunity for Jamaica to do so, given the fact that the three host nations are already there and therefore not rivals, and the expanded format as well. So I suppose then when you put all those pieces together, you can say, okay, well, this actually would make more sense. But then obviously resigning, that did surprise me. Although again, on reflection, I suppose the signs perhaps were there in advance, where if you're not going to be able to get them through in this big moment, does that damage your credibility for then the playoffs? And then obviously it feels like it's a much more difficult situation, that the playoffs. So yeah. What do you think of his whole sort of tenure? Do you mind me throwing this back on you a little bit?
No, I'm asking the questions here.
Okay.
No, but I want to jump to something quickly here because I wanted to speak to a particular narrative that maybe can help me with, right? Yep. Because I spoke with the JFF president, Mike Ricketts, last night, and he said that he felt that at times the team underestimated the other teams in the group. And I found that interesting because in every single press conference that I heard Steve McClaren was a part of, there was so much, he was so guarded in speaking about his opponents. And in some sense, I actually found it a little bit annoying because, okay, you are actually ranked higher and yes, you should respect your opponents. I get that, right? But I almost got the impression that there was too much respect. And Jamaicans tend to go about with a little bit of swagger, and I think that possibly helps with their performance. So, I mean, just looking on in terms of his approach, I figure that's always Steve McClaren, but success doesn't necessarily follow him around when he's leading a group. So, can you explain what's happened there?
Yeah, there's loads to go out there, I think, isn't there? I mean, what I have found intriguing is his sort of calmness on the touchline has been, it seems to me, a point of potential critique for the fans, that they kind of want to see more from him. I was actually noticing when the penalty was awarded, the stadium was going absolutely potty, and it was. I don't really know if I've experienced that kind of ride of emotions in sort of a minute or two of football watching, where you've got this kind of, I don't know, agitation, frustration, desperation turning into absolute elation when you think there's a penalty and a chance of qualification, turning into sort of frustration, then turning into anger after the game. We saw some scenes between players and fans. Amidst all that, McLaren was kind of very calm. He didn't really react, and I don't know if that's because he felt this could get overruled, or whether he just felt I need to still be composed, because you never know, they might miss the penalty, or there's then 5 minutes, whatever time. It was actually less than that, wasn't it? But there's some more minutes left to go. But I think that's always how he has been. I covered Derby County when he was head coach there, and they got to the playoff final, and that's like £150 million game. So that's another really significant moment, and they played brilliantly, but they lost 1-0. And so you are right in that he's had these moments, obviously as England manager as well, where big moments haven't quite worked for him. On the flip side, he has also, I would say, done excellently well to coach FC20 to the Eredivisie title. You know, they've not been anywhere since. That was a real shot out of nothing. Also with United, I know he wasn't leading the group as such, but you know, the treble can't be discounted. And then also under Erik ten Hag winning the FA Cup final, which I think he had an influence in terms of the approach for that particular match. So that was a key match that actually went, you know, in his, or you know, the club's favour. But yeah, in terms of not taking the opposition sort of with enough regard, it kind of feels like you sort of sense that he was actually with too much regard almost. It's interesting, these perceptions, and I suppose how we maybe form them after the results. I think he's probably, from what I can tell, there's obviously sort of, I don't know, intricacies of managing Jamaica and sort of trying to get the right team on the pitch, and having to, you know, negotiate that in a way that you don't have to do as much when you're a club manager, because you've got a bigger squad. It's kind of game after game after game. So maybe that's why he was being reserved about the opposition, because he wasn't necessarily sure exactly what team he could put out, or what kind of performances the players would put out.
Would you think that he would have taken a lot of advice from those around him? Because there are a lot of local people there that would have probably been in his ear in terms of team selection and stuff like that. Do you think he's that type of guy?
Yes, for sure. I mean, obviously he's got his own people as well, hasn't he? That he's brought across. So he'd probably lean on them more, I would imagine. You know, Richard Hartis, who came back as, you know, assistant, didn't he, rather than just goalkeeping coach. So that's somebody. Trevor Sinclair. But you must. I think he would have tapped into the local knowledge as well, because you know, you've got this contrast, is it, between Jamaican players that are performing here, or you know, have kind of got that in their sort of makeup, and then players that are, you know, being recruited, shall we say. So I think you need to have a bridge between the both. I think he probably would have listened, but then ultimately he's the manager, he's got to make the decisions. I mean, I obviously don't know Jamaican football as well as you, Donald, so the kind of selections was an interesting one to kind of see the perception of other people, like, you know, like Whisper being, you know, chanted for, you know, early on in the match, and then he comes on and does well. You know, could he have started maybe? I don't know.
It's probably the second or third time that we'd have said it, in terms of, okay, he's made such an impact, why not, you know, start him?
Right, yeah.
You know, and I guess that's going to be one of the things that we look back on as we do the post-mortem on this World Cup qualifying campaign. But of course, he did hand it in his resignation letter after the game, and spoke to the media. Didn't take any questions, and I fully understand why. But obviously he was, in my opinion, I thought he was really emotional in that press conference. Yeah,
I think so. Yeah, I think it has. I think for all his kind of composure, he's a guy that loves football. You know, he's 64. He's seen a lot. He's experienced a lot. He doesn't need the money, but he's come clearly with that objective to try and reach a World Cup finals. That would have been a really, you know, a positive, not end to his career, because I think he wants to go on still, but I think it would have been a nice touch, you know, in the winter of his career, shall we say. So yeah, clearly loves football. So I think that's where the emotion comes from, for sure, you know. And yeah, for all that he is, you know, a kind of, you know, pretty stoic figure on the touchlines, he certainly feels it, and I think that's what the resignation sort of letter showed. I thought he spoke really well. I know he read, from a pre-written sort of statement, but he composed it and then, delivered it. And I think he is somebody that has clearly taken Jamaica to heart, and he must be disappointed, and that he hasn't been able to get them to the World Cup finals. Maybe he could have answered a couple of questions, but at that moment, you're sort of thinking it then becomes one more, and when would it have ended? And then it could have gotten more heated.
Yeah, because it was heated after a while. Sometimes questions are asked of football managers, and then I'm thinking that it doesn't make any sense to be asking football managers political questions.
Yeah.
So it irks me sometimes, right? But having said that, in the aftermath of Hurricane Melissa and what would have happened on the island and the devastation that took place, I actually found it a little bit surprising that we didn't hear or see much from him, with the exception of when he did that press conference that you would have been a part of just the day before the game. And Jamaicans in the past were used to our coaches being ambassadors almost. They help in terms of getting sponsorship and pushing the program, and they're almost a political figure in and of their own right. It's not the same in other countries, obviously, but maybe that is something that he didn't quite buy into, and maybe Jamaicans would have looked at him hands off, and he did the same in terms of his approach, and there wasn't that relationship. After every game, he would have gone back to England. There was no residence here per se, even to look at local talent on a regular basis in the Jamaica Premier League. So maybe there have been missteps that he would think about now.
Yeah, I mean, on a practical sense, I would struggle. I think it's hard for a manager to relocate. I suppose he could maybe spend more time here, but I think if you look at the makeup of the squad and the players, most of them are in Europe, right? I mean, so correct me if I'm wrong. I might be speaking out of turn. Do you think there is anybody in the Jamaican leagues that could have then pushed for a selection?
Well, the thing is, the aim is for him to try and spot the talent,
sure.
right? And I'm not sure if you'll be able to thoroughly spot the talent if you just spend a week or 10 days here. So I think there should have been more. It should have been a little bit more honest, I think, in terms of at least scouting the land, and because that's what happened during the 1998 World Cup campaign. Mind you, it was a different time. René Simoes moved here with his family and was technical director as opposed to head coach, which is the job that Steve McClaren had. So René Simoes was asked to design a football program, and of course the core of that team were based in Jamaica from the local Premier League. So yes, it is a different assignment, but I think the perception is that he was too far removed from the culture and everything here. So and we've seen it before, like when Jose Mourinho was Manchester United manager, he stayed at a hotel for all that time. So there it sends a message.
Yeah, for sure. You are right, and I suppose that's the trade-off, isn't it? It's how far as a manager are you willing to push this? And I mean, there's Premier League managers that still have to commute a long way to get to their clubs, and they're there every week. So I suppose to kind of uproot your life, but then I do take your point. If you want to really embrace the culture and the team, then you need to spend more time, don't you? I mean, we're getting this in England at the moment with Thomas Tuchel. He's been grilled over the fact that he doesn't watch as many matches as some people would like him to, which is kind of an interesting point of conflict at the moment. And probably not conflict's probably too strong a word, but intrigue. But I'd take your point. So on Hurricane Melissa, do you think, because I'd heard him speak on it a couple more times in different press conferences, but obviously when the question's been put to him, so he's responding rather than kind of going proactively on it.
Right.
Could he? Do you think he could have come earlier and would visiting a site, or what could he have done? Do you think would that be too much?
I think that would have helped.
Right. Okay.
And I'm sure that the JFF would have accommodated that request, because a few Reggae Boyz actually went out into the field, so I think that could have been something that could have helped their cause. I mean,
in
nobody
those
likes
moments. Sorry. So if that connection is then established, do you think then in those moments when it's maybe not going quite right on the pitch, the fans stay with you rather than turn against you and think he's an outsider rather than someone that's with us?
Exactly,
right,
and that would have helped, And who knows, maybe if he was a little bit more in touch, he would probably understand why the fans were crying Whisper's name during the match, and that he probably wouldn't have taken it by surprise if he did, and say, okay, maybe these kids are special, maybe these kids deserve the opportunity to really express themselves on the field. I remember in his first press conference, I asked him about if these early stages he would keep the handbrake up, or if you allow players to express themselves. And of course, him being cautious, he says that it's just a matter of feeling his way through. So I understand that perspective, but it in the end, again, it's just a few missteps that could have made things differently. But as far as his resume is concerned, how much is that affected? Because in the eyes of a lot of football fans, and not just here in Jamaica, oh, you're in CONCACAF? Oh, three of the teams are hosting the World Cup, and you're with Jamaica, and they're one of the higher ranked teams in CONCACAF, and you don't qualify for the World Cup? That's crazy. Like, it's a blot on his resume now, isn't it?
Yeah. But I suppose, I mean, that they could still qualify, but then obviously if they do qualify, it's
not
somebody else
because
that's
of him,
done it.
right?
Yeah. It's a blot because he obviously came here with that intention, and I think we can all agree. You'd think that they are the theoretically the best team with Curacao and Trinidad and Tobago and Bermuda in that four. I mean, obviously Curacao have themselves gone quite aggressively to recruiting players, from the Dutch football system. So it's obviously such a big tournament to be at that countries are pushing the boundaries of what perhaps historically would be the accepted norm. But that's not to take away from their achievements. And obviously you could still say, well, look at Leandro Bacuna, for example, somebody that I covered when I was across the Midlands football and Aston Villa. Their captain, their best player, he played pretty well last night, I thought, but he's playing in Turkey's second division, 34 now. So it's not like they've got these. They're getting these really established Dutch players, and kind of making them their own. There's still some questions over there, levels of quality, shall we say? But I think that maybe their edge is that you're playing regularly. Again, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know how many of the Jamaican team are playing regularly, and then to kind of snap back into it for a camp. When I covered Wales, this was a similar thing where you'd have a lot of players that were in League One, Championship, League Two, not necessarily even playing all the time, and then to kind of come back into it and get up to speed straight away is tricky. But yeah, there's obviously at the end of it, you would want Jamaica to qualify from this group, and they haven't.
Let's talk about Manchester United. So, Manchester United fans. So let's talk about Manchester United, because goodness me, what a headache. I mean, let's not get too personal, because I am a Manchester United fan as well, right? But this season has looked a little bit better.
Yep.
If I'm to be honest with you, Ruben Amorim, he has done well with what he has. Apparently he's had issues similar to what Jamaica's team has had in terms of where are the midfielders and who to play in those slots. But what are your thoughts on the season so far that Man United has had?
Yeah, I mean, it looked at one stage like it was from the outside going to implode, and Ruben Amorim's future was in doubt after the Brentford game. Certainly, that was a real bad one. After that point, Sir Jim Ratcliffe came out and backed him. Really, they'd won against Sunderland at that point, and then came the Liverpool game, which that was the big sort of rocket fuel for the belief in him, and then the kind of optimism around the club. So yeah, obviously they're on this 3 wins, 2 draws sort of streak, 5 games unbeaten after not going back-to-back wins under Amorim in the Premier League. So that's certainly an improvement on last season, although it couldn't have got much worse really in domestic competition. So yeah, I think they are showing signs of improvement. Certainly you've got quality players in there. I mean, when you've got Brian Mbeumo playing for you, I just think he gives you that maverick quality that anything can happen. He can create stuff and can score. He's got a good start to the season, and you start seeing some relationships developing, him and Ahmad on the right. That's kind of now making more sense to me than it did do initially, when I thought that's kind of Ahmad being pushed out of his best position. But if they can both get advanced and attacking, that's pretty hell for defenders trying to stop them, isn't it? These two guys that are very skillful. The big question, I suppose, is AFCON, and what happens when they both go away, plus Mazraoui. So that could be as many as 6 Premier League games that they miss if they go far. The players that they would bring in to replace them are not like for likes. They're different kinds of players, so can they adjust to that? But yeah, I think when you look at the condensed Premier League, obviously Arsenal look like they're setting the pace, but all other teams have shown fragilities, and I think there's an opportunity there for United to actually, they need to qualify for Europe this season. Can they push on into those Champions League places?
You know, I love watching your colleague Karl Anka dissecting United and how he explains certain dynamics and how Ahmad has been allowed in the last few games more space on the right-hand side as Mbuma comes in, right? Have you seen the tweaks that have been made? Because it's such a massive argument each and every time about this formation and him playing through at the back. And sometimes I think a lot has been made about it per se, but because it's United, you have to be speaking about something, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, United are the most, I would say, written about club in the world and the most polemic club in the world. That being said, they have, just done stuff to justify that in recent years, takeovers and various indiscretions and, other sackings and what have you. So it's been a lot of turmoil. But, then, you get a manager like Ruben Amorim who's not afraid to speak his mind. I mean, that's another point, behind closed doors, he's very strong with players, and that is then, that causes ripples, right? If you're going to kind of call out somebody in a group setting, that is eventually going to leak out. I mean, it leaked out pretty quickly with Alejandro Garnacho. So that's what then generates headlines and attention, and the system then, because it's such a departure from what United have done previously, and because he's so clearly wedded to it, that is going to be a talking point. And was it suited to the players that they had? Is this pain going to be worth it, where actually we see the fruition of this vision where you do have these wing backs that are so advanced and attacking that actually it's a real problem for defences to counter from. So I've forgotten what your actual question was there, Donald. I've sort of spoken a random way. Did I answer it?
You did, but I want to go to the boardroom, right? Because I'm trying to figure out if the boardroom is more street smart now. I know that you probably get tips every day, right? But you are very meticulous and methodical with what you reveal in your stories, and I appreciate that. You don't go tweeting every minute and say who is interested in what or whatever. So we understand and we appreciate that, Laurie. Trust me. But do you get the impression that the board is a little bit more street smart with how they go about business, like in the transfer market?
Yeah, I think there was definitely room to improve from the previous regime, where it felt like decisiveness wasn't there, and there was sort of a bit of confusion over who had the authority, and was there quality of scouting, or was there quality of taking action on the scouting at the required level. I think there's certainly more aggression from this new regime, and you've seen the way they've been able to sort out the Brian and Mbeumo transfer when other clubs were interested, and they made sure that they had the pieces in place there. Now you can maybe say they overpaid slightly. I think in the current market, given what he's now producing, you sort of just go sort of fair enough really there. Cunha, they obviously triggered the release clause, so they're looking at players where you could maybe just do it automatically and it doesn't have to be this big long running saga which we've had in previous seasons, mentioning no names, Frankie de Jong. So I would say there is certainly an improvement now. By the same token, this is fairly new territory for some of them. Omar Barada, Chief Executive, Jason Wilcox, Director of Football. They've held really meaty roles before, but it's not been at this level at a club the scale of Manchester United. So we don't know that it's going to work. We don't know that their decisions are the right ones at this moment. Certainly you can see some, I think, encouragement. I think most of the signings, in the last 2 years, you've gone, that's been okay. Even look at De Ligt, that was more one that was pushed by Erik ten Hag, but he's now coming, I think, into his own this season. So I think certainly an improvement on what's gone on in the past.
Finally, is this your first time in Jamaica?
It is indeed.
How have you liked it so far?
Loved it, yeah. It's like I say, it's a shame that we didn't get the carnival today, the parade. God only knows what that would have been like. But I've been absolutely thrilled by the hospitality of everybody. It's obviously amazing weather. It's certainly better than what my family are experiencing back in Manchester. And I've had some beef patties.
Oh, you have?
Chicken jerk. Yeah, I've done juicy and tasty.
Oh, good. You tried them both.
And Devon House as well.
Yes.
So actually, I did Devon House ice cream.
Mm-hmm. What flavour?
So I got the Devon Stout.
Not bad. I like it at times.
Do you? Yeah,
Yeah.
it was an acquired taste for me. I'm glad I got it. I always try things, but I don't know if I could, eat
So
a lot of
you would
that.
stick with vanilla and maybe cookies and cream?
Well, cookies and cream, yes. I like a bit of flavour. Is it? So they had that, but the other one I got was rum and raisin. And now so I had double alcohol basically in my ice cream. I was sort of staggering walking down the street after eating it. But and the rum that they did, clearly it must be Ray and Nephew, because it's definitely a white rum. I could really taste it. I was like, this is different to the rum and raisin back home. So yeah, but it's an experience. You got to try it, right?
Oh yeah, it's amazing. I hope you come again and this time bring your family.
Yes, they would love that as well.
So much of Jamaica to explore. And I thank you very much for your time, Laurie.
Thanks so much, Donald. Absolute pleasure.
Well, that is it for another edition of the Sports Club podcast. We thank you for joining us for yet another edition here at the National Stadium. And really and truly, it's been a pleasure having Laurie Whitwell of The Athletic here with us on behalf of the entire production team. It's goodbye from the National Stadium.